Hi everybody. This is a prologue to your video on pricing, and in it I want to cover two quick little points. Um, First of all, I recorded this video last week and I was super excited to share it with you. And then I had this crisis of faith in myself. And it's basically imposter syndrome. I was beating myself up like, what on earth do I know about today's market? How can I possibly position myself to provide advice to people who are starting out? And I'm sure you are well familiar with how this whole spiraling happens and plays out. So, yes, that is very true. The market is very different now than it was when I started out. And the longer you wait to start on your own journey, the more different the market's going to be from the point in time in which I'm recording these videos. That's just the nature. That's just the nature of how things change. I can't control that. What I can do is share with you my experiences and my perspective and the things that I've learned along the way to help you make the best decisions you can for your own artwork and for your own business. And the advice that I'm giving is a pricing structure that is market-based. And of course, you can bring on board all sorts of hybrids to that if you want to start with the market-based assessment and then bump that price up for certain things like your materials cost or projected or desired marketing expenses. Absolutely do what feels best and the most appropriate for yourself and for your own artwork. Ultimately, this is your business and you're the boss and you're the one in control. And all you can do is make the soundest decisions possible based on what you know at this point in time. So I want to give you full permission to do that. And one other final little point with regard to pricing. One of the reasons why I hedge on the conservative side myself is because you only want your prices to go up. That is the message, the trajectory that you are sharing with your customers is that your prices are only going to go up. They are never going to go down. So if you start out by pricing your work a little higher than what the market's going to bear and end up having to reduce prices in order to move inventory, you're sending the wrong visual to your collectors. You don't want your collectors to feel like they're getting a bargain, which is often what happens when we purchase things on sale, right? You want your collectors to believe in what you're bringing to market and feel fully confident paying the price that you decide is your going rate because they believe in your work and they're super enthusiastic and excited about it as well. So your prices are only going to go up. You're going to figure out the best methodology for doing that, and I am going to sit back and watch you shine. So enjoy the rest of the video and my information on pricing and run with it. Happy creating. Hey everyone, this is episode 3 of Business Bites, and today I'm going to talk to you about some pricing strategies. So pricing can be a complicated topic and it can be a little confusing at first, but I'm going to share some of the strategies that I've learned over my last 25 years of being a working artist and hopefully demystify some of that for you. Okay, so the very first step is to do an assessment of what it is you're bringing to the market. So you need to know what your market is, like what style of work are you doing? Style isn't the right word, genre. What genre of work? Are you doing florals? Are you doing still lifes? Are you doing landscapes? And then within that genre of work, do you have a further niche? Are you a plein air painter? Are you doing paintings from a particular geographic area? Are you going to do portraiture? So you really need to nail down what it is you're bringing to the market, okay? And then once you do that, you're also going to assess your skill level. And assess your skill level, I'm basically thinking beginner, intermediate, and accomplished. Now, there's all sorts of steps in between each of those. It's so important that you look at what you can do in a non-biased way, okay? Because what you want to do is assess your skill level, your technique level. What is your draftsmanship like? Are you able to draw or represent what it is you're seeing in the appropriate way? Now, some methods of expression are not representationally based, and that's okay too. But really, you want to assess your technique level. How well are you utilizing your tools? How professional does your finished product look? What materials are you actually using? So, there's further sorts of price points based on whether you're working on paper or gallery wrap canvas or creating sculpture. There's even different price points based on what type of paint or materials you are using. Watercolors, acrylics, oil paints, something mixed media, maybe encaustic. So you really want to sort of categorize the work that you're bringing to the market based on how proficient you are with your tools and your media, what sort of genre of work are you making, any sort of niche inside that genre that's going to further set your work apart, and then the kind of media and substrate and materials that you're using to make your work. Once you have all of these factors identified, your next step is to go and do research. And you want to find people, artists who are working out there who have as huge of an overlap with all of these categorizations of your work as possible. You want to find a really close match between what you want to bring to the market and what you see other artists have already brought or have out there on the market. You want to compare apples to apples. So not only is it important that your assessment is concise and spot on and truthful, but it's also important that your comparison, when you find these other artists out there who are working in the world and selling their work, that it's an even or as close as possible a matchup. And then you are going to learn what that artist's price point is for their item, their art, that matches what it is you're making. So let's say that you're making 8x10 plein air landscape paintings. You're going to find other artists who are plein air painters and working with their 8x10 size, whose skill level and technique and media match what you're using, and you're going to determine what their price point is for that 8x10 size, okay? You're going to gather this data on 3 to 5 artists that you can find who match up with what it is you're going to bring to market. And then you're going to create a little spreadsheet, and you're going to take their price point for that 8x10 and you're going to average it out, okay? That average price point from your research is going to be your starting point for your 8x10 plein air landscape painting. So I want you to take a look at this number. And I want you to really ask yourself, is this a realistic number? This number has been calculated based on a market comparison, and it has nothing to do with what your actual overhead is or your cost of materials or your labor hours or any of the incidental costs related to creating this piece of art. It is quite possible that you need supplemental or additional streams of income in order to keep your doors open based on your starting price point. That is very realistic, so don't beat yourself up over that. That is a very realistic position to be in. So look at what this cost is for an 8x10. In video 1, I talked about what your overhead, knowing what your monthly overhead was just to keep your doors open. So, do a little bit of math. How many 8x10s do you have to sell in order to hit that threshold to just cover your overhead? Again, we're not talking about cost of materials or anything else. And ask yourself, is this a realistic pace of output for me? In instances where these numbers don't match up, there are multiple ways that you can tweak this, okay? For instance, you could change your substrate. You could invest in additional education. You could give yourself the opportunity to level up. You could go out and acquire other experiential things that would help you to raise your price point when you get started. There's multiple ways to look at how you can tweak this starting point. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is that you choose a price point that suits your market. And we really can't control what other artists of similar caliber or experience are pricing their work at. We know that we're going to settle into that pond, right? And we need to be comparable inside that pond at that price point in order to attract new customers. So we can't really control any of that extraneous stuff, but what we can control is the product we bring to the market, what we infuse in that product, its quality level, and all of that, and find a way so that we can establish a starting price point for an 8x10 piece that is manageable or workable for a set period of time. You're not going to sell your work at this price point for, indefinitely. This is your starting point. This is you getting established, hitting the ground running. It's much more beneficial, I think, to underprice yourself a little bit so that your customers feel and experience a tremendous value in engaging and purchasing art from you. When a customer feels like they're having a great time or they really appreciate the product that they've managed to acquire, they're going to tell their friends about that. That's the sort of advertising that you don't have to pay for. That's built in to each and every transaction. So setting yourself up at the beginning to amplify your relationship with your customer is really going to help with the sort of grassroots marketing that is going to push your business to grow in the future. And when your business grows, that's when you have the opportunity to start to raise your prices. Okay, so you're going to research the others. You're going to come up with an average price point. You're going to assess how realistic that price point is. And then from that price point, what you are going to do is extrapolate your price points for other sizes. So the pricing format that works the best, that is the most consistent and fair to the customer across a wealth of sizes, is a price point or a formula called linear pricing, linear inch pricing. I'm not going to explain the math to you in the video. Go out and do a Google search and you'll get the whole formula on how to take your price point for that 8x10, extrapolate what your linear inch multiplier is, and then you can proceed to effectively and evenly price out all of the other sizes of work that you're going to offer. And here's the thing. When the customer comes to you and they're requesting a quote or they want to know what the cost is of a particular painting, you don't have to explain to them how many hours went into it or how much of this expensive tube of paint was in there. You just say, my work is all priced based on size and based on substrate, the quality of the material the art is on. And it's that way across the board. And you could even say, I use a linear inch method. My multiplier is, say, 20. And now your customer can figure out on their own if they can afford an 8x10 or maybe they really want a 16x20. So calculate that linear inch price for all of your other sizes that you offer and create a spreadsheet of your own so that you know immediately, based on the size, how much that piece is going to cost when you bring it to market. You can even design a flyer with this information and put this on your website or have a digital image of it saved on your phone. But it's very handy to have as a reference. and it makes you look very professional when a collector approaches you and wants to begin a conversation about a piece in a particular size. You have that information already all determined. That demystifies the pricing aspect from the customer's perspective, right? You already know your product, you already know your price point, you're ready to discuss the details of their project, the personal aspect of their project. And again, that sort of mindset increases the value of the engagement with the customer, and really tells them that you're committed to making the art that they're going to love and value, and that's what they're going to take away and share with friends and family members who see the piece when it's hanging in their home. So a couple of things that we didn't include in our price point calculations. One of them is hourly rate. Okay. I know this is a big one for beginning artists. They say, but I've invested 2 weeks in creating this piece, and this price point doesn't reflect all of the hours of time that I put in the piece. That doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And I know this might hurt some of you to hear that. The hours of time that we invest in a piece are not uniform. When I sit down to do my work, the same size painting, multiples, one may come together in a day or two. Another one may take 3 to 4 weeks for me to figure out. And that's because of the complexity of the problems that particular design presents, as well as my own energy levels, my own mindset. Maybe I'm preoccupied with something else. What I bring to the easel changes on a daily basis, and I can't control that. And I'm not going to penalize my customer by pricing something higher because it took me longer to solve those problems. I will tell you, the more miles you get under your brush, the more painting that you get in under your belt, the less time it's going to take you to create those pieces that once cost you or required 2 weeks of an investment of time. Your window of hours in your work is going to be reduced as you become more proficient. You learn to make better decisions, and you have a whole bunch of mistakes behind you because that's what you learn from. So no hourly rate is calculated into the basic price point. We also didn't incorporate any marketing costs. At the onset, when you're establishing that price point, we're not figuring out marketing yet. We're not talking about any incidental costs, like maybe having a professional photographer photograph your work. We're not talking about framing costs or any of the additional materials costs that might be involved in packaging your work for the shelf or for the market. We're not talking about cost of materials. We're not factoring in any commissions that you might have to pay. And I want you to think about this, okay? So when you make a piece of artwork and you sell it directly to your customer, you've done that sales cycle yourself, right? So you've created the work and closed the sale all by yourself. You haven't needed to involve any other parties. When you get gallery representation, or your work is hanging in an exhibition or in some other space, it is common for that space, when they close that sale, they charge the artist a commission rate. This commission rate varies based on the space. It varies based on your contractual arrangement or agreement with that space prior to hanging your work there. But this is what that space gets paid to close the sale. And bundled up inside that fee that you're paying them is all of their overhead, all of their utility costs, any of their marketing, any of their outreach. You're paying for access to their client base. You're paying for them to close the sale on your behalf, right? So now you're not paying any sort of credit card or processing fees. That third party is paying those, and then in turn, they're going to cut you a check. So When you sell directly yourself, you pay yourself that commission. But if a third party is involved in a sale, they earn a commission. We did not factor any of that commission rate into establishing this first price point. We did not factor in any income taxes or any taxes that you are required to pay based on your zip code. So there are other things that need to be considered when you are bringing your work to market. But my feeling is that the most important thing is that you do your homework and your research initially and find out what other artists of comparable skill, comparable material, comparable subject matter are getting for their work, and establish that as your starting point. As your business grows, as your sales records grow, as you move more pieces out into collections, you're going to have the opportunity to learn about all of these other factors and gather real-time data on what your actual marketing costs might be, on what your actual tax responsibility might be, and you'll have the opportunity to determine if you wish to begin to work with third parties to sell your art. One other point about pricing, and this is the most critical one of all. Your prices must be the same no matter where your art is hung. And it's a common rookie mistake. They're painting work, they're selling it to friends and family, at a certain price point, and they enter it in a show. And the piece gets in the show, but the gallery hosting the show is charging a 30% commission. And so the artist raises their price in order to pay the gallery that 30% commission so that the artist still gets the same price that they were getting for comparable works being sold already. This undermines so many things. First of all, if a gallery finds out that your work is priced lower on your website than it is in public spaces, they're not going to want to work with you. Because a savvy collector is going to go into a gallery, see the piece, make note of your name, and look for your website. And if that collector can find comparable work on your website for less money, they're not going to buy through the gallery. And the gallery is going to learn about this, and they're not going to want to carry or represent your work anymore because they can't sell it. You've effectively